Welcome to Caguani Social, the space where we unpack the unspoken rules of growth, culture, and community. I'm your host, Johan. Every week, we navigate the social, professional, and legal landscape that shape our life, bringing actionable insight to elevate our minority community, especially our Afro, Caribbean, and Hispanic family. Whether you are climbing the career ladder or navigating the complex system or just looking for your tribe, you belong here. Let's grow together. Vamos.
Imagine, for just a second, that you're sitting in a courtroom.
Okay.
Your freedom, your future, your very life hangs in the balance. The air is super tense. You can hear the scratching of the court reporter's machine, the rustle of papers, the aggressive pacing of the prosecutor. It's a terrifying scene.
Oh, absolutely.
But there is a massive catch. You don't speak the language of the judge. You don't speak the language of the jury or, the lawyers who are literally arguing over your fate.
Right.
You rely entirely, completely on the interpreter sitting next to you, whispering into your ear.
It's a huge amount of trust.
Exactly. Now, imagine that interpreter speaks a very formal, rigid, textbook version of your language.
Yeah.
But you speak a rich, culturally specific, highly colloquial, regional dialect.
Which is super common.
Right. To you, it's just the way people talk back home. It's fluid, it's fast, it's totally natural. But to the court, however, that dialect might sound entirely different.
Yeah, it creates this invisible gulf. I mean, you are technically speaking the same language, sure, but you are operating under completely different sets of linguistic rules, different cultural assumptions, different phonetic habits.
Yeah.
And in a high-stakes environment where literally every syllable is scrutinized, that gulf becomes a very real liability.
Which is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to our deep dive. We are exploring the vibrant, complex world of Dominican Spanish today.
It's such a fascinating topic.
It really is. We're pulling from comprehensive dictionaries of Dominicanismos, some amazing academic papers on phonetic radicalism by linguists like Orlando Alba, and some really brilliant research on the sociolinguistic complications of English-Spanish legal interpretation.
The sources are fantastic.
They really are. So we're going to trace what happens when this dynamic, everyday language like the language of the streets, the colmados, the family dinner table, when that collides with the heavily sanitized, rigid environment of the U.S. legal system.
Right. We're essentially looking at a phenomenon known as the comprehension penalty.
The comprehension penalty.
Exactly. What the data shows is that innocent colloquial phrases can suddenly sound evasive.
Oh.
Or worse, incriminating.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grammatical structures that are perfectly normal and efficient in Santo Domingo, they can sound uneducated or dishonest to an untrained ear in a New York or Miami courtroom.
That's terrifying.
It is. Because language isn't just about grammar or, expressing a thought. In these settings, it functions as a critical tool for human rights and legal equity.
So let's start with the architecture of the language itself.
Yeah.
What is often proudly called buen dominicano.
I love that term.
Right. Because right off the bat, we need to completely dismantle the idea that a regional dialect is just slang or a degraded version of a standard language.
Oh, absolutely not.
The historical roots of Dominican Spanish are incredibly deep and complex.
They really are. I mean, the history of Hispaniola fundamentally shaped how people speak there today.
Right.
As the first major Spanish colony in the Americas, which was established in the late 15th century, the island was initially this bustling administrative hub.
Like the center of everything.
Exactly. But as the Spanish Empire expanded to Mexico and Peru, Hispaniola became, somewhat isolated.
Okay.
And when a colonial outpost becomes isolated, linguistically, it acts like a time capsule.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it preserves what linguists call archaic Spanish.
Meaning words that essentially went extinct in mainland Spain centuries ago, but are still used every single day in the Dominican Republic.
Precisely.
The sources point to the word disc, which I thought was fascinating.
Disc is a perfect example. It derives from the old Spanish phrase, disque. Literally, it has said that.
Right.
Over centuries, it contracted into a single word used to express doubt, hearsay, or something allegedly true.
So how is it used in a sentence?
So if someone says, el disque viene mañana, they are saying, He supposedly comes tomorrow.
Ah, okay.
But it has this baked-in layer of skepticism.
Like, yeah, right, he's coming.
Exactly. It's so efficient.
And then there's the verb lamber. I found this super interesting.
Oh, yeah, lamber's a classic.
Yeah, because if you learn standard modern Spanish, like from a textbook, the word for to lick is lamer. But in the Dominican Republic, they preserved the archaic Western Spanish form, lamber, with a B.
They held on to the older consonant structure. But the thing is, the dialect didn't just freeze in time. It integrated with the environment.
Right, the contact with other cultures.
Exactly. You have the indigenous Caino influence, which gave us essential survival and agricultural words.
Like what?
Things like canoa for canoe, hamaca for hammock, canuco for a small plot of cultivated land.
Oh, I didn't realize those were Taino words.
Yeah. And crucially, you have profound African influences.
Right.
The horrific history of the transatlantic slave trade brought enslaved populations from various regions of Africa to the island.
Yeah.
Linguistically, this didn't just add vocabulary. It deeply influenced the rhythm, the intonation, and the tonal patterns of Caribbean Spanish.
So it completely shaped the sound of the language. And honestly, the acoustic properties of the dialect are what really jump out in the research.
So definitely.
When reading Orlando Alba's phonetic studies, he uses the term radicalism to describe Dominican consonants.
It's a strong word.
It sounds intense, right?
Yeah.
But when you actually look at the mechanics of it, it makes total sense.
The consonant system, particularly in working class or rural sociolects, is highly dynamic.
Right.
The most prominent feature, which anyone who has heard Caribbean Spanish will instantly recognize, is the elision, or the dropping, of the letter S at the end of syllables and words.
So they just skip it entirely.
Pretty much. Instead of saying este, meaning this, a speaker says eight.
Okay.
Instead of mas, meaning more, they say ma.
I try to look at this through the lens of linguistic shorthand.
What do you mean?
Like, it's like text abbreviations, but for your mouth.
Huh. That's a good way to put it.
It's an evolution driven by speed and efficiency. You're stripping away the unnecessary acoustic fat, basically, to get straight to the point.
Exactly.
Because the S is a fricative sound, right?
Right.
It takes a fraction of a second longer to produce because you have to push air through a narrow channel in your teeth.
Right. There's physical friction.
Yeah. So if you drop it, the vocal tract stays open and you can speak much, much faster.
And that drive toward acoustic efficiency is universal in human languages, honestly.
Yeah.
But it's particularly pronounced here.
Yeah.
We also see this with the vocalization or lateralization of the liquid consonants.
The L and the R.
Yes, the letters L and R at the end of syllables. Depending on the region, these sounds mechanically shift in the mouth.
And the regional variation is just wild to me. In the northern region, the Cibao, an R or L at the end of a syllable, often turns into an I sound, like a semi-vowel.
Right.
So the verb correr, to run, becomes corre. Perdón, forgiveness, becomes perdón.
It's a very distinct sound. And if you travel south to the capital, Santo Domingo, or the eastern provinces, the tendency shifts toward lateralization.
So the tongue placement changes.
Slightly, yes. The R swaps for an L. So puerta, door, becomes puerta.
Puerta.
Exactly. Quarter becomes corral.
Wow.
Furthermore, there is a widespread dropping of the intervocalic D, the D sandwiched between two vowels.
Right.
So the word cansado, tired, loses its rigid consonant boundary and softens into cansao. Lado, side, becomes lao.
Okay, wait. I have to challenge the efficiency argument here for a second.
Go for it.
Specifically with the dropped S, I totally understand dropping a letter to speak faster. But in Spanish, the S is the primary plural marker.
It is.
So if you have los niños, the boys, and you drop the S's so it becomes lo niño, you've just destroyed the plural marker entirely.
It seems like it, yes.
So if I'm shouting across a noisy street, how does the listener know if I'm talking about one kid or a whole group of kids? Doesn't this create massive ambiguity?
It seems like it would create absolute chaos.
Yeah.
But language is incredibly resilient.
Okay.
The first safeguard is context. Usually the surrounding conversation makes it totally clear if we are talking about one thing or many.
Sure, context is huge.
And the second safeguard is syntactic. Often, other elements in the sentence, like the verb conjugation, will signal the plural, even if the noun itself doesn't.
But what if it's just a raw noun phrase, like just the words by themselves?
This is where Orlando Alba's research reveals something truly brilliant.
Oh.
Speakers do something called resyllabification.
That's a big word.
I know, but the concept is amazing. The human brain subconsciously knows when that S is absolutely critical for meaning.
Okay.
If the next word in the sentence starts with a vowel, the speaker will miraculously resurrect the dropped S and attach it to the beginning of the next word.
So it's used as an acoustic bridge.
Yes, so las uñas, the nails, doesn't just become la uña, which would sound identical to the singular la uña.
Right.
Instead, the S survives by jumping across the word boundary, and it sounds like la uña.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the language has a built-in real-time autocorrect that only activates when absolutely necessary to prevent a breakdown in communication.
That is a staggering level of subconscious cognitive processing.
It really is.
And yet, despite this incredible mechanical efficiency, the sources dedicate a lot of time to the concept of linguistic insecurity.
Yes, that's a major theme.
Because standard textbook Spanish, the kind used in formal education, by news anchors and by the wealthy elite, retains those consonants.
And so the retention of consonants becomes a class marker.
Of course it does.
When the educational system and the media constantly reinforce that proper Spanish sounds a certain way, many Dominicans internalize the idea that their natural, efficient dialect is somehow broken or inferior.
Which is so sad.
It is. There are urban myths documented in the dictionaries we reviewed that Colombian Spanish or Castilian Spanish is the best or purest Spanish.
Which, linguistically speaking, makes absolutely no sense.
Not at all.
A language's quality isn't determined by how many fricative consonants it retains from the 16th century.
Exactly. The author of the Dictionary of Dominicanismos tackles this directly.
What do they say?
He argues that quality of speech is a reflection of the speaker's education, their breadth of vocabulary, and their ability to articulate complex thoughts.
Right.
A highly educated Dominican speaking with dropped S's, vocalized R's, and archaic Taíno words is speaking a remarkably rich, high-quality Spanish.
Because it's perfectly communicating the ideas.
Yes. The stigmatization of the dialect is a purely social mechanism used to enforce class hierarchies, not a linguistic reality.
That social mechanism is crucial to keep in mind as we transition from how the language sounds to what the words actually mean.
Definitely.
Because even if you tune your ear to catch the dropped consonants, you still have to contend with the vocabulary.
And that's a whole other challenge.
Yeah, this is where the language becomes a total minefield for outsiders. The dictionary sources are full of semantic shapeshifters, words that exist in standard Spanish but have completely mutated in the Dominican context.
We see words that have taken on immense cultural and emotional weight.
Right.
A standard Spanish-English dictionary is often completely useless for deciphering these terms because it strips away the sociological context.
Let's look at guapo.
Oh, guapo is a great example.
If I study standard Spanish and go to Madrid, guapo means handsome or good-looking.
Very straightforward.
But if I take that exact same word to the Dominican Republic, the meaning inverts.
Completely. If someone describes you as guapo in a Dominican context, it is definitely not a compliment about your physical appearance.
What does it mean?
It means you're angry, aggressive, belligerent, or potentially incredibly brave.
Wow.
The reflexive verb phrase ponerse guapo means to get irritated or to lose your temper.
So to get ugly almost, in terms of behavior.
You can think of it that way. The dictionary provides this really vivid colloquial idiom, guapo como abeja de piedra.
Which means?
Literally, braid as a stone bee.
A stone bee, that's awesome.
Right. It describes someone who is fiercely valiant or violently unyielding. The psychology behind the word shifted from an aesthetic judgment to a behavioral one.
And then there is the ultimate Dominican linguistic wildcard, vaina.
Oh, vaina.
The sources trace the etymology back to the Latin word vagina, which originally meant a sheath for a sword.
Yes, and over centuries, in standard Spanish, it evolved from a sword sheath to refer to the pod or husk of a plant like a vanilla bean pod.
Okay, sure.
But in the Caribbean, it abstracted entirely. It became a universal placeholder.
I like to think of vaina as the variable x in an algebraic equation.
That's a perfect analogy.
It can represent literally anything, and you can only solve for x by looking at the rest of the equation, like the speaker's tone, their facial expression, the whole situation.
Exactly.
It can mean a physical object, a complicated situation, an annoying chore. If someone says, ¿Qué vaina es esa? Depending on the inflection, it could mean, what is that thing on the table? Or it could mean, what kind of mess is this?
Yeah, or if someone says they're going to echarse una vaina, they are saying they're going to get themselves into deep trouble.
Oh, interesting.
It relies entirely on shared cultural context.
Yeah.
Another deeply sociological word is tigre, or tigre.
Meaning tiger.
Literally, it means a tiger. But socially, it describes a very specific archetype.
Right. It's not just a jungle cat. It's a survival mechanism.
Exactly that. Historically, especially during the oppressive Trujillo dictatorship, and the economic hardships that followed. Survival in the urban centers of the Dominican Republic required immense street smarts.
You had to be tough.
You did. A tigre is someone astute, opportunistic, charming, but potentially ruthless.
Okay.
It's a complex judgment. You might admire a tigre gallo for their hustle and skill in navigating a tough world.
Like giving them props.
Right. But in a formal setting, calling someone a tigre implies they are a delinquent, a thug, or an untrustworthy opportunist.
The vocabulary also holds on to the island's economic history, like the word cuarto.
Yes, cuarto.
Literally, it means a room or a fraction, a quarter. But colloquially, it means money. If someone says, no tengo un cuarto, they mean I am completely broke.
And that's a direct carryover from the colonial era when old Spanish copper coins were physically divided into fractions called cuartos.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The coins disappeared, but the word remained. And layer on top of all these archaic words and the indigenous words, you have this massive influx of anglicisms.
English words.
Yes. The geopolitical reality of language contact with the United States has birthed a whole new lexicon.
These loanwords are fascinating because they adapt to the phonetic rules of Dominican Spanish.
They do.
The English word watchman, like a security guard, gets processed through the Dominican phonetic filter and becomes guachiman.
It's brilliant.
The American Jeep becomes Yepeda, but it expands semantically to mean any SUV, right? Not just a Jeep brand vehicle.
Exactly. My favorite example from the sources is Bosch.
Oh, what's that one?
It derives from the English expletive bullshit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but in the Dominican Republic, it morphed into a noun meaning a severe reprimand.
No way.
Echar un Bosch means to loudly and aggressively scold someone.
So if I'm an outsider or, let's say, an interpreter trained in standard Spanish, I might assume I can just rely on context clues, right?
You might think that.
Like, if I am sitting in a cafe in Santo Domingo and someone says he is a tiger, I can read the room. I can look at the person's body language and figure out they mean an opportunistic hustler, not an actual literal tiger.
Right.
Why is this so catastrophic in a formal setting?
Because context clues require time, shared environment, and a low-stress atmosphere.
Oh, okay.
The research highlights that when you take these semantic shapeshifters out of the casual commado and drop them into a highly formalized environment, the cognitive resources required to parse them just evaporate.
You're too stressed.
You cannot read the room when the room is designed to be sterile and adversarial.
Which brings us to the collision point of this deep dive.
The courtroom.
A misunderstanding in a cafe is a funny anecdote. A misunderstanding in the U.S. legal system is a matter of life, death, and human rights.
Exactly.
The U.S. adversarial court system is based on English common law. It relies overwhelmingly on oral evidence. Real-time interrogations, aggressive cross-examinations, witness testimonies under oath.
Everything is out loud.
Every single syllable is transcribed, analyzed, and weaponized.
And trapped in the crossfire of this highly combative system is the court interpreter.
Yeah.
The thesis we are reviewing outlines an impossible mandate placed on these professionals. Judges, who are almost entirely monolingual, instruct interpreters to translate word for word.
Right.
To a judge, this seems entirely logical. It sounds objective. Just swap the Spanish word for the English equivalent, like swapping out parts in a machine.
But the linguistic research calls this the word-for-word fallacy.
It's a huge fallacy.
Languages are not interchangeable machine parts. They do not have one-to-one replacements.
When a court enforces a transliteration, a direct, literal word swap, it strips away the pragmatics.
And pragmatics are?
The pragmatics are the actual intent and meaning behind the phrase based on the context.
Got it. The thesis provides a terrifying real-world example of what happens when you adhere strictly to surface-level words.
Yes, the traffic stop case.
It involves false cognates, words that look and sound similar in two languages but mean completely different things.
Right.
A Spanish-speaking defendant is pulled over in a routine traffic stop for running a red light. He ends up in court for the ticket.
The interpreter, adhering to the legal context and the superficial sound of the English word violation, tells the defendant in Spanish that he is accused of a violation.
In standard English, violation in a courtroom means a traffic infraction or a breach of rules. But in standard Spanish,
Violation means rape.
oh my God.
Yeah. The defendant experiences an immediate, severe emotional crisis.
I can't even imagine.
He believes he went to court for a traffic ticket and is suddenly being informed by his own interpreter that he is on trial for sexual assault.
That is horrific.
It caused immense unnecessary trauma and completely derailed the courtroom proceeding, all because of a false cognate.
And that failure happened with standard Spanish.
Exactly.
Now let's inject the highly specialized sociolinguistic minefield of Dominican Spanish into that same rigid word-for-word system.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Imagine a Dominican witness on the stand testifying about the moments before a physical altercation. The lawyer asks what happened, and the witness says the defendant se puso guapo.
If the interpreter is poorly trained in sociolinguistics, or if they are terrified of the judge's mandate to not interpret, to simply translate word for word, they will access their standard Spanish mental dictionary.
Right.
They will translate se puso guapo as he became handsome.
Which obliterates the entire narrative. The witness is trying to explain the escalation of violence. He became aggressive.
Yes.
But the English record, which the jury is hearing and the judge is analyzing, now says he became handsome.
And the jury will look at the witness as if they are completely unhinged.
Obviously. It makes no sense.
Or consider the word tigre. A lawyer asks the witness to describe the defendant, and the witness says, él es un tigre.
Okay, so what does the interpreter do?
If they say tiger, it's nonsensical.
Right.
If they try to capture the social archetype and say street thug, they're suddenly making a massive prejudicial character judgment.
Because maybe the witness just meant the defendant is a smooth talker.
Precisely. By choosing thug, the interpreter has inadvertently testified on behalf of the witness, dictating the jury's perception of the defendant's character.
I have to ask about the motives of the legal system here.
Sure.
If decades of linguistic research prove that literal word-for-word translation creates distortion, why do judges insist on it? Is it just ignorance?
It is a fundamental clash of paradigms.
Okay.
The legal system demands a sterile, exact, objective record. The court believes that if an interpreter translates the meaning rather than the literal words, the interpreter is overstepping their role.
Like they're injecting their own opinion.
Right. They think the interpreter is essentially becoming an unsworn witness. They are terrified of subjective interpretation altering the evidence.
I get that fear.
But the linguistic paradigm proves that human language, especially a dynamic regional dialect, is inherently messy and context-dependent.
You can't sanitize it.
No. When you try to force a fluid, culturally bound concept into a sterile, literal English translation, the result isn't objectivity. It's an illusion of objectivity that actively distorts the truth.
And the distortion goes deeper than just mistranslating vocabulary. Sometimes the very soul, the emotional state, and the confidence of the speaker are accidentally edited out of the record.
This is a huge problem.
The research delves into what is known as the syntax of suspicion. This looks at how interpreters subconsciously alter testimonies through two mechanisms: over-editing, which is subtraction, and adding fillers, which is addition.
Let's examine over-editing first.
Okay.
The sources detail a case study involving a Mexican-American witness giving a deeply emotional, traumatic testimony. In his native Spanish, he naturally uses colloquial grammar and hedges. He uses words like este, meaning, or pues, meaning well.
Just natural speech.
Exactly. He uses the imperfect tense to stretch out the action. He is hesitating, processing trauma in real time.
But the interpreter, operating under the immense pressure of the courtroom and trying to sound professional, omits all of those hedges.
They flatten the testimony entirely.
They deliver sterile, direct, concise English sentences.
And it might seem like the interpreter is doing the witness a favor by cleaning up their speech.
You're making them sound more put together.
Right. But in reality, they're stripping away the speaker's humanity. The English-speaking jury doesn't get to hear the hesitation of a traumatized person reliving a horrific event.
They just hear facts.
They hear a sterile fact dispenser. The witness comes across as unnaturally robotic, cold, and rehearsed.
It's like applying a heavy-handed generic photo filter over a deeply textured, localized piece of art.
That's a great way to think of it.
The standard interpreter, washes out all the crucial contrast, color, and shadow.
Yeah.
It looks cleaner to a monolingual judge, sure, but the emotion is completely gone.
Exactly.
And then we have the flip side, which is arguably even more damaging, addition.
Addition is incredibly dangerous. This is where the interpreter adds words that were never spoken.
How does that happen?
Well, the source details a case where a witness is asked a direct numerical question about undocumented immigrants crossing a border.
Okay.
The witness answers in Spanish with absolute clarity. un promedio de 21. Literally, an average of 21.
Direct, definitive, no hesitation.
But the interpreter translates it to the court as probably an average of 21.
They injected, and probably.
In another example, a witness describes a small plane that transported him. He describes it clearly as a white plane con rojitos azules with little blue stripes.
Very clear.
The interpreter translates it as a sort of blue lines.
Let's dig into the psychology of this. To a layperson, adding a sort of might just seem like a verbal tick from the interpreter. Why is this so legally devastating?
Because of how juries are trained to evaluate credibility.
Okay.
Decades of research in legal linguistics, particularly studies from Duke University, have established the concept of a powerless testimony style.
A powerless testimony style.
When a witness uses hedges, fillers, and qualifiers, words like juries inherently view them as less competent, less intelligent, and less truthful.
Wow.
When the jury hears the interpreter say, probably, they don't consciously separate the interpreter from the witness.
They blend them together.
Yes. They assume the witness is hesitating. They assume the witness is unsure of their own memory.
That is so unfair.
It is. The interpreter has accidentally taken a highly confident Spanish-speaking witness and turned them into an unreliable English-speaking witness.
This is where we have to reintegrate Dominican syntax, because this is where the collision becomes a catastrophic chain reaction.
Exactly.
Earlier, we talked about Dominican double negation. If a Dominican speaker wants to emphasize a negative, they frame the sentence with two negative markers. Yo no sé decirle no. Literally, I don't know how to tell you no.
Right.
We also talked about the lack of subject inversion in questions. ¿Qué tú dices? Instead of ¿qué dices tú?
Now, put a standard Spanish-trained interpreter in the middle of that.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Interpreting consecutively is a neurological high-wire act. You have to listen to the source language, hold the concepts in your working memory, translate the meaning into the target language, and speak it aloud.
All at the same time.
All while the speaker is continuing to talk or a lawyer is staring you down. The cognitive load is immense.
So if that interpreter's brain is wired for textbook Spanish and they suddenly get hit with a rapid-fire string of Dominican double negations and dropped consonants,
their brain requires an extra fraction of a second to parse the syntax. They have to untangle the colloquialism before they can translate it.
Yeah.
And in that fraction of a second, they hesitate. To buy their brain time, they use a filler word, they say, where they stumble over the English phrasing.
And the jury hears that stumble.
They do?
The jury hears the hesitation, and the jury thinks, this witness is evasive. This witness is hiding something.
That is the ultimate tragedy of the comprehension penalty. The witness hasn't lied. They haven't been evasive.
They just spoke naturally.
They simply spoke their native, highly efficient dialect. But the system's inability to process that dialect smoothly penalizes the witness. The interpreter's cognitive overload is transferred onto the defendant as guilt or untrustworthiness.
But I want to push back on the interpreter's role here.
Yeah.
Are they just undertrained? Are they making conscious decisions to alter the testimony? Like, whose fault is this?
The research emphasizes that this is rarely malicious. It is a systemic failure.
A systemic failure.
Yes. The interpreters are victims of a system that tests them on high-level vocabulary and legal terminology, but rarely trains them in sociolinguistics. They are not taught the pragmatics of Dominican, Puerto Rican, or Mexican regional dialects. When they fall back on literal translations or add fillers, it's a coping mechanism for a system that demands the impossible.
Which brings us to the profound, overarching question of this deep dive. If the legal system inherently flattens, misinterprets, and penalizes regional dialects, what does this mean for the concept of justice itself?
It reframes language from a mere tool of communication into a fundamental civil right.
Right.
In the United States, this right is anchored in the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution. You have the right to a fair trial, the right to an impartial jury, and crucially, the right to confront the witnesses against you.
But if you literally cannot understand the nuances of what the witness is saying, or if the jury is receiving a distorted, powerless version of your defense, that constitutional right is an illusion.
The U.S. attempted to address this with the Federal Court Interpreters Act.
Okay, what was that?
This was a landmark piece of legislation sparked by a 1970 case, United States ex rel. Negron v. New York. Negron was a 23-year-old immigrant from Puerto Rico with a 6th grade education. He spoke zero English. His court-appointed lawyer spoke zero Spanish.
Wait, how does a trial even proceed under those conditions?
It proceeded as a farce. 12 witnesses testified against Negron in English.
Oh my God.
An interpreter occasionally summarized what was happening during breaks, but during the actual testimony, Negron sat there in silence.
He had no idea what was happening.
The appellate court judge later wrote that for Negron, the trial must have been nothing more than a babble of voices. He had no idea what he was being accused of or what the evidence was.
That is deeply unjust.
The Interpreters Act was supposed to guarantee certified interpreters to prevent this exact scenario. But as the research shows, providing an interpreter is not enough if the system itself is fundamentally flawed.
And the most glaring flaw, the one that absolutely blew my mind reading the sources, is the issue of the official record.
Oh, this part is infuriating.
This is where the structural inequity is perfectly, permanently cemented. In U.S. courts, the court reporter typically only records the English interpretation of the testimony.
Right.
The original Spanish audio, the actual words spoken by the defendant or the witness, is not transcribed, and often the audio is not even preserved.
It's gone.
I want to let that sink in for the listener. If a Dominican witness says, "se puso guapo," meaning he got aggressive, and the exhausted interpreter translates it as he got handsome, the official court transcript forever reads, he got handsome.
Yes.
The Spanish is practically erased from history?
It is entirely erased.
Yeah.
And the legal implication of this is catastrophic for the appeals process.
Right, because of how appeals work.
If a defendant is convicted and appeals the decision, the appellate court only reviews the written English record.
Mm-hmm.
If the English sentences are grammatically correct and read smoothly, the appellate judges assume the trial was fair.
They have no idea what was actually said.
They have absolutely no way of knowing a dialectal mistranslation occurred unless a bilingual lawyer happened to be in the room, caught the error in real time, and formally objected on the record.
The thesis mentions a staggering case, United States v. Santos, involving complex Medicare fraud.
Yeah, that's a wild case.
An interpreter mistranslated the Spanish equivalent of medical assistant as physician's assistant.
Which is a huge difference.
Those are two wildly different levels of medical certification with entirely different legal liabilities.
And in that case, the interpreter even admitted to the mistake during the trial.
Wait, really?
Yes. But the judge denied a request for a new interpreter or a mistrial. The jury was left to sort through the confusion. The system relies entirely on happenstance to catch these errors.
And beneath the mechanical errors and the cognitive overload, the research points to an even deeper layer of implicit bias.
Yes, implicit bias is definitely at play.
The argument is that the U.S. court system operates under an ideological framework that implicitly stigmatizes non-standard dialects.
Mm-hmm.
Whether consciously or not, the system views dialects like Dominican Spanish or African-American vernacular English or any working-class sociolect as inherently uneducated or dangerous.
We see this bias manifest in how interpreters sometimes correct the speakers they're interpreting.
That quotes around correct.
Exactly.
Oh.
There is a documented example in the research involving a Spanish speaker who used an Anglicism. The speaker used the word lease.
Like a rental lease.
Right.
Yeah.
For example, firme a lease. I signed the lease. As we discussed earlier, this is incredibly common due to language contact in the U.S.
Right, it's a natural loanword. Everyone in their community knows exactly what it means.
But the interpreter, an older professional trained in prescriptively pure Spanish, decided to play editor. Instead of interpreting the concept accurately based on the speaker's sociolinguistic reality, the interpreter overrode the speaker and used the highly formal textbook Spanish term contrato de arrendamiento.
They decided the speaker's natural dialect wasn't good enough for the dignity of the courtroom.
Exactly. They enforced a linguistic hierarchy. They silenced the speaker's true voice to impose an artificial standard of prestige.
Wow.
When you synthesize all of these issues, the phonetic radicalism, the semantic shapeshifters, the cognitive load, the word-for-word fallacy, and implicit bias, the conclusion is inescapable.
What's the conclusion?
Interpreters cannot simply be walking dictionaries. They must be trained as sociolinguistic mediators.
Right.
Without deep, culturally specific training in dialects like Dominican Spanish, the justice system is flying blind, making decisions based on distorted data.
So let me play devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay.
What is the actual logistical fix for this? The U.S. court system processes millions of cases. Do we need a specifically Dominican interpreter for every Dominican defendant? A Puerto Rican interpreter for every Puerto Rican witness? A rural Mexican interpreter for every rural Mexican defendant.
Sounds impossible.
Right, the courts would grind to a halt. It seems logistically impossible.
It is a valid concern, and the sources do not suggest matching nationalities one-to-one for every case.
Okay, so what's the fix?
The solution lies in systemic structural reform. First, the certification and training of interpreters must be overhauled. Robust sociolinguistic training must be mandatory.
So they need to know more than just the textbook language.
Exactly. Interpreters need to be educated on the historical development, the phonetic tendencies, and the semantic nuances of major regional dialects, not just the Castilian standard.
So they need to know what a tiger is. They need to know the complex psychology behind the word guapo.
They need to possess that cultural lexicon, yes. Second, the courts themselves must change their paradigm.
The judges need to change.
Yes, judges must be educated on the word-for-word fallacy. They must allow and encourage interpreters to use pragmatic equivalence.
Which means?
Meaning the interpreter is permitted to change the literal grammar or the idiom to accurately convey the intent and the meaning of the phrase to the jury.
We have to trust them to be the sociolinguistic mediators they are.
Precisely. And most critically, the physical operation of the court must change. The system must mandate dual language transcripts.
Yes, that makes so much sense.
Audio recordings of the original source language must be preserved, and the official written transcripts must reflect both the Spanish spoken and the English interpreted.
That's the only way to catch the mistakes.
That is the only way to ensure that dialectal errors can be caught, reviewed, and corrected during the appeals process.
Let's bring all of this together.
Let's do it.
We started this exploration on the lively, vibrant streets of the Dominican Republic and in the bustling colmadas of the diaspora. We looked at a linguistic ecosystem where language is hyper-efficient, where dropping an S or vocalizing an R into an I is a testament to the speed of human thought and a marker of cultural belonging.
Beautifully said.
Where calling someone a tiger is a complex social calculation, and where a word like vena acts as a linguistic wild card, taking on 100 different meanings depending on the context and the twinkle in your eye.
It is a dialect perfectly engineered for the people who live within it. It is rich, historical, and dynamic.
But then we watched as that same linguistic richness was dragged into the cold, sterile, high-stakes environment of a U.S. courtroom.
A very harsh transition.
An adversarial environment that demands sterile exactness from a messy, beautiful human language. And we saw how that collision creates a terrifying trap.
The comprehension penalty.
Exactly. A comprehension penalty where your own mother tongue, the words you use to express your deepest truths, can make you look evasive, unsure, or even guilty.
Because the legal apparatus, and often the overworked interpreters trapped within it, lack the sociolinguistic tools to bridge the massive gap between textbook expectations and the reality of how human beings actually communicate.
Yeah.
Until those systemic blind spots are addressed, the promise of equal justice under the law remains tragically out of reach for millions of dialect speakers.
Which brings us back to where we started. Sitting in that courtroom chair, relying on a stranger to translate your life. I want to leave you, our listener, with a final lingering thought.
Okay.
Think about your own everyday speech. Think about the hyper-specific slang you use with your closest friends. Think about the regional idioms you grew up with, the phrases your grandparents use that make no sense to anyone outside your hometown.
We all have them.
We really do. Think about the way you structure a sentence when you were terrified or stressed or desperately trying to defend yourself. If your freedom depended on someone else translating your exact intent into a rigid language they learned from a sterile textbook, what parts of you would be lost in translation?
It's a question that really forces us to reckon with the fragility of communication.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. We hope you walk away with a fundamentally new perspective on the architecture of language, the deep beauty of regional dialects, and the hidden complexities of the legal system. Until our next exploration, keep questioning the world around you.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you for your building with us. Now go out there, handle your business, and most important, enjoy your life. You earn it. Don't forget to hit follow. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear something like this. And come back next week to share this time with us. Stay strong, stay proud, and I'll catch you on the next one. Hasta la próxima. Bye.